Welcome. This will be my completely spoiler-free review of the first season of Telltale's The Walking Dead from 2012. So, before I get too far into it, no harm in saying, the game is rated M for mature, so will this video be, and I really fucking loved this game. Now, a couple of quick things. This video will not cover the DLC 400 Days. Most likely going to do a separate video on that. And I appreciate that a lot of people, what they love about this game and its sequels is going back and replaying to try out different paths. Right now, my wrists are very sore, so I don't play as much as I used to, and as such, I have only played through this once as I record this, and right now I'm not really planning on playing through this particular one again. I understand the appeal of it, and like, if I was doing this video 10 years ago, I almost definitely would have. So, if you really badly want to hear some of the, review aspects where you can really only, get into if you've played it more than once and seen multiple paths, this is not that review. So I played this on PC through Steam, and I guess a good place to start is I've watched the first 5 seasons of the TV show, and I read, I wanted to make sure that I didn't fuck it up for myself, so I read somewhere before I started playing this, and now I can confirm, yeah, this does not spoil the show. It is not sharing a continuity, and from what I understand, it might share a continuity with the comics, none of which I've read. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't really read comics anymore because of physical pain primarily. And the but yeah, there are characters that appear on the show, and from what I understand also appear in the comics, that appear in this game, but it's definitely not in the same continuity as the show itself. So you can, whether if you only feel like, or if you're just figuring out the order, whether you go for the show before the game or vice versa, you're completely fine. I suppose an argument could be made that if anything, you may want to play the game before watching the show. There's not, let's see, it's not that there's a lot, but I did notice one thing where they don't get into something immediately in the game that, I guess there's something that is a relevation in both show and game, and well, actually, come to think of it, I guess regardless of which of them you go for first, it might spoil the other unless you're extremely fortunate, or you find someone who will let you know how far you can go in either of them, and then you can do them, really close together, like some of Is that a spoiler? Some of the Disney franchises have recently done similar. Well, at least one. I guess I'll leave it at that. But yeah, uh, you really don't need to know very much before you start playing this. Certainly nothing that is exclusive to Walking Dead, like the I guess, come to think of it, no, yeah. I would say, the bare, the basic idea of, the thing about, a couple of the core things of how zombies work. The something like how a bite can spread infection, might not be the worst thing to know before you start. Um, and yeah, that's basically the yeah. So not going to give too much information about the plot, because I was very, very happy to find, like, there was an early part where I was, I was playing through this and I was like, oh, okay, so they're gonna do this. I get it. And then it swerved in a really fun way that, like, yeah, I was surprised on multiple occasions by where they went with this. But I guess I'll give an overall. I haven't played any of the second season yet. I have started playing 400 Days, but I'm not gonna particularly talk about 400 Days in this video. But yeah, I was personally quite, like, I'm very excited to play season 2. I know basically nothing about it yet, but I was definitely, I felt like a full story had been told by the end of this one, and I really appreciated the way that over the course of it, I really, really was incredibly emotionally invested. Um, Honestly, I think one of the, even if you have thick skin when it comes to horror, like, if you at all think that there's some chance that something could be too emotionally intense, as you get attached to characters and worry about them and maybe have to say or do things where you really feel like, oh no, I can't do that to them. That's one of the main things I would say. Like, if I were to tell someone, you probably shouldn't play this game, like, you're missing out. I hate to tell you not to play it, but yeah, it'd be them. But yeah, yes. So basically, you play as Lee, who, when we first meet him, is already in a situation that really, like, immediately, you know, one might find oneself, you know, um, judging might be the right word. And so, the game is essentially saying, this is how it's going to be. Like, you are not necessarily gonna, like, you're not, see, the thing is, I didn't know the details before I started playing, and I was very happy to be surprised by the opening. I'm gonna keep it vague. Um, but yeah, from right away, it's kind of saying, yeah, like, if this is not okay with you, this is, it's only gonna get more tough from here on out. And yeah, not very long after the very start, he meets Clementine, who is 8 and needs someone to take care of her. Now, okay, before you decide that you're not going to play it, we're not talking about an escort mission. Not at all. There were times during this where I was like, I guess here comes the escort mission, but it doesn't really happen. So I really appreciate it. You can tell that they, when working on this, they knew, because like by 2012, like, we were really sick of that. I'm not saying that no game has done a good job. I think, it's not the best Silent Hill game, but the 4th game, I think, does some... There's an interesting idea in there or two regarding the escort mission aspect of it. None of which I can go into without spoiling. I honestly forget if I talked about it in my video on it. If not, I'm pretty sure... Let's see if I can remember their name. Pim's Crypt, I think. Pretty sure they talked about it. They did a really, really excellent video on the 4th game. Anyway, but yeah, most of the time, escort missions are terrible. And I really appreciate that they didn't do that here, because, like, the thing is, escort missions shouldn't be bad, because, like, there's something really compelling to asking the player to value an NPC's life really highly. It just... I'm not gonna go off on a whole rant, but just, it's, for example, stuff like AI. I'm not talking about LLMs. The AI on a lot of NPCs that need, that you have to protect during escort missions is just terrible. They're practically running into the enemy's bullets. So it ends up really frustrating. But this gets what the yeah, here we do have none of the, all the strengths, none of the weaknesses of vampires, escort missions. And yeah, that is okay. Tell you what, if you, upon hearing that you're gonna spend the game trying to help an 8-year-old, and you've heard me say that it's not an escort mission, if you are like, pass, okay, the game might not be for you. But yeah, like, one of the really clever things here is that, and this is also something, I'm not going to go too much into detail about the show here either, but the show also has a somewhat similar relationship. It's this thing of, like, well, you have the core element of just, like, trying to be, let's go with legal guardian, even that's a little bit of a stretch too, but certainly not biological parent, but parental figure. You know, the like in on an like everyday basis, you know, there's like you know, it's this stuff about like setting boundaries, nurturing their you know them as people, and you know, yeah, tending to their emotional needs, protecting them, stuff like that. That can already be a really challenging thing, you know. But then you add the fact that there's fucking zombies everywhere, you know, the dead walk. And suddenly that gets turned up to 11, you know, like it's one thing to be like, oh, you know, I mean, if my kid is playing outside, you know, I'm gonna keep my eye on them, and you know, I'll teach them not to take candy from strangers, not to talk to strangers, stuff like that. Okay, what if the strangers want to eat their fucking flesh and outnumber you? You know, like that's, yeah. And at the same time, you have this thing of like, well, I also don't want this little kid to like, I want them to retain some innocence, some like, I don't want their spirit to be crushed, you know? So throughout this game, that is one of the main things that they're, yeah, that's one of the major appeals, because like, you know, okay, I want oh, you want to protect someone against zombies, there's other games that have that, you know. And if you just want like some kind of zombie game, I have good news for you. There's kind of a fucking lot of them. Um, but the yeah, I think I will. Yeah. So one of the let's see. I guess yeah. I will talk about. So I already mentioned that there's multiple uh, um, paths, story paths here, and you know, the way that they are, um, the way that you get to see multiple is that every so often over the course of this game, you will be asked, you know, to say something, and occasionally do something. It'll be in brackets, but like there'll be, you know, dialogue between multiple characters. Sometimes you'll be one of them, and other times you'll just be interjecting, even though it's, you know, there was a conversation between others. But yeah, you know, and I really appreciate how incredibly flexible it is here, because like I've been playing video games since I was 7, over 30 years now. I know what like branching dialogue is, you know. This is not my first rodeo. It's not even the first where like specifically what you say can like make a huge difference, you know. I guess it's honestly, I think the closest to this I've played might be like the first Deus Ex, I guess, because that also has, you know, in that one, like there's times where if you pick the wrong dialogue option, game over, you know. Hope you saved recently. Actually, I don't even remember. Does that game has autosaves? Shit, I think it's been like 10 years since I played. I haven't played it since I did my video, my longer video on it. Anyway, but yeah, basically, you know, with yeah, I guess I'll briefly note. Yeah, so sometimes it's just a calm conversation. Other times it's somewhat more tense, complete with, like, there are times where, some of the time you can basically take your time in picking an answer. Other times there'll be this, like, bar that is slowly emptying. And if you let it empty all the way before picking a response, I didn't, I think I only let that happen like once or twice, but, it would mean, the times that it happened to me, it means that you just don't say anything for a conspicuous amount of time, and, it might seem like you're trying to, like, not be, like you're maybe not taking enough responsibility, like there's an expectation there, obviously. And yeah, there are times where during a conversation, maybe there is some, like, specific threat that you're having to, maybe you have to talk two or more people out of a conflict, like talk them down. Maybe you have to convince one of them to take a certain action, and it might be life or death, and the yeah, the okay, so that's most of what I wanted to say about that. What was the other thing? Right, yes. So there will often be three options, not counting silence. And I thought they did a really good job of having the on occasion, the three of them will be very similar. It'll be like granular differences, but that can also, sometimes that also really works, But yeah, like, a bunch of the time, I think I'll give an example of something that happens at least once. If two people are arguing, you can say person A is right, you can say person B is right, or you can say both of you have to calm down. And those are three very different ways to de-escalate a situation, whilst hypothetically all of them could, you know? Um, and to be clear, it's not always like that. That's just something, yeah, I've made my point. And the if you keep taking one person's side or nobody's side, like, might the other person or just someone who's also part of your group, because, that's something common to the zombie survival genre, regardless of medium, might, be good to have a group of survivors. Well, maybe, yeah, someone in the group will be like, wow, you sure do take that one person's side a lot, don't you? But of course, if you're, or failing that, you never take that other person's side. You either say you're taking one person's side or you're taking no one's side. But if you keep going back and forth, that's also going to mean, they're going to be like, geez, grow a spine, will you? So I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love when a video game asks you to make difficult decisions and you find yourself afterwards thinking, did I fuck up? Was that the wrong choice? Because yeah. That's such a compelling tool when, for designing, developing video games that have that can support that kind of thing. I'm not saying all games can, but it's always something. So the most recent I played similar to this would be Unsorted Horror. Other than that, we have frictional games output. So the first two Amnesia games, I am going to at some point get to 3 and 4, as well as Soma and the Penumbra games, well, especially the first two. But I really appreciate the way that it would develop the relationship between Lee and other survivors. And I guess I'll just also briefly note, much like the show, and I hear the comic, some characters will last longer than you might think, and others die much sooner than you might think. I really was surprised by several of and in this game, I mean, specifically. Also other stuff. Anyway, yes, and I'm not gonna lie, there were times where I found myself really torn when choosing dialogue options. If I was gonna try to play it the way that I figured might get like the outcome that was best, if I was gonna say what I most felt like, the specific situation, yeah. And when I sometimes picked something that I was like, okay, I know this is not going to be this is not the most sensible thing, but you know what? I'm going to fucking say it, because this, like maybe a character's really getting on your fucking nerves, or maybe, okay, I'm not going to spoil, but yeah, there were definitely times where, and I really admire a game that lets the player, because like it's fairly rare for a dialogue option you choose to just lead to you, like, what's the word? Just a game over, a fail state. Usually you can keep going, which again sometimes, because that really drives home this thing of like, was that technically the wrong thing to do? But like, I don't know, like maybe down the line there's going to be something where, like, because it's the zombie apocalypse, like, you can't make everyone happy. That's just not an option. So are you, like, who do you try to keep the people happy that you're most worried about in a crisis situation? Like, if you take, if you gander at a survivor and you're like, if push comes to shove, this motherfucker is going to leave me to die? Or do you try to be good to the ones where you're like, I mean, this is a saint. This is just a good person, you know? I really appreciated having, like, I was constantly, like, even when I wasn't playing the game, I would be thinking about, was that the right thing? Should I have, shit. I bet, and I would try to, like, predict how things were going to play out later based on the decisions. And I have not tried it, but there is a rewind feature that I understand allows you to, let's see, I think it's, if you want to go to a specific spot and just see what would, and just play from there on to, so you don't have to start all the way over if you don't want to replay the entire episode. So yeah, the season of the first season of The Walking Dead Telltale it's doesn't matter. I'm getting into the weeds. Never mind. But yeah, you can I understand that that's something that one can use. And when you when you choose a dialogue option that specifically, like, there's a, by way of describing it, so basically you can, sometimes there will be, it'll pop up in the upper left of the screen, something to the equivalent of, they will remember that. Occasionally, literally, those, like, verbatim, but yeah. And sometimes, that character is now, sad, or there's some, yeah. And so, that helps you, deduce, like, if you want to try for branching paths, that's some of the stuff that would be different. I think that might more or less cover, but yeah, that is very much the centerpiece, the dialogue options and the branching paths that that allows for. And I mean, I've been hearing about it for 13 years, I guess, that this is, oh shit, I meant to say at the start of this, this is also the first time that I play a Telltale game, but it's not going to be the last. I'm not just talking about the rest of this franchise either. But the actually already got some of them on sale. But the but yeah, nor am I only talking about, I know they did one of the Monkey Island games, but yeah, yes, been hearing about how Average, some people don't think it's the bee's knees. I disagree. I don't know. I mean, I get, so I can't really speak about it in detail since I haven't played it, and that's my policy. But yeah, I have heard there are some people who don't love the branching path. No, you know what? I would butcher the argument that others make. There are people who describe what they take issue with about the branching path system. Just, if that's a major part of the appeal for you, then, make sure you seek out. I'm not trying to ignore what they've said. I'm belaboring the point. Moving on. Yeah, I guess I will just briefly note. So I hopefully am not repeating myself when I say I love the fact that you can play this for a long time and still be like unsure if you made the right choice. And after a while, I started to think, is there a right choice, or is it just the lesser of the evils? And maybe you don't realize for a while if you did get the lesser of the evils or not. And yeah, I really appreciate that. I think we have so many power fantasies in video games, and I'm not pretending I'm above it. I fucking love playing Just Cause 3, some of the Prince of Persia games can be adequately described as power fantasies. I'm not saying, all I'm saying is I think it's really great when there are games that also help remind us, hey, in the real world, you don't always know. Ideally we all do our best and try to make the world a better place, but sometimes, you just can't be sure. And it's, at some point in your life, you're going to have to face that head on, apply directly to the forehead. And I think it's good for video games to help, engender that. So other than that, basically, I think as the next thing, I'll talk about a few of the things that the game doesn't do. Because again, if you want to shoot, do you want to shoot zombies? Then this is not really the game for you. You'll shoot more zombies in, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes of one of the Left 4 Dead games. Not counting the times in between, but, during, if you're seeing combat in a Left 4 Dead game, 10 minutes of that, you're gonna kill. I'm choosing 10 rather. I don't want you to know exactly how many zombies that you do shoot in this. I just want you to know, if that's the thing you want. The game itself is, for how long this game is, if the thing you want is shooting zombies, you're gonna feel bored during this. It is not about that. And so zombie survival, it's a genre that lends itself well to the specific subgenre of video games called survival horror. I think it's probably only fair if I tell you I don't like survival horror. I fucking love it. It is one of my all-time favorite genres. And, it's not an accident. Like, several of my favorite games, we're talking... I can never pick just one. Honestly, I guess the first 4 Silent Hill games. I feel bad that I can't really compare and contrast very much to Resident Evil. I've only ever played the second one and then Survivor. Um, and the second, to an extent, the first. Well, okay, I respect the first, but I love the second System Shock game. Honestly, even fucking Nocturne. The so the fact that this is very much not, honestly, Contagion as well. I know, sue me, but it's and Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. Okay, I'm just listing fucking every survival horror game I've ever played now. Okay, moving on. I knew that this game was not like it was not survival horror. So I I figured that I would still really get into it on account of the branching paths, story, the dialogue options. I even yeah, the I was not prepared for how much I was gonna get into this. That's yeah. Oh, I guess I should say I'm not going to detail the other characters. I'll just say I appreciate that some have, I've seen reviews where they said, some of the characters they liked, some of them they didn't like. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. There wasn't a single character in this that I just never liked. Like, there was at least one where I was like, wow, fuck you too, buddy. But then I learned a little bit more about them, and it was like, oh, fuck. You too, buddy? And I think they did a fantastic job on that, and that's, again, something the show also does really, really well. And yeah, I thought they did a really great job on the characters. A couple more things I definitely want to make sure to say about characters. I thought they did a really good job having a good diversity. Oh, great. The chuds just stop watching. Honestly, if they hadn't stopped by now, the anyway, yeah, the great diversity of like ages, of ethnicities, um yeah, I thought they did a good job um making sure that it wasn't either all men or all women, and the personalities, there's a lot of variety there as well. Like, honestly, as much as I, in recent, I guess, months by now, have struggled to remember some things about at least a number of fictional characters, I would never like mistake any two characters in this game for any other. And yeah, I really appreciate that. And it's not there's a decent amount of them too. Now, let's see, and never too many at the same time either. There was one spot where I was like, okay, this is getting to be a lot of characters, and yeah, I guess I'll just say either I changed my mind on that, or maybe something happened to at least one of them. But yeah, they did a really, really solid job on that. Right. And so Lee, you find out some stuff about him immediately. And then after that, for a while, you kind of get to, well, really, okay, yeah. You get to choose how you think he is, like, what's the word? How he would react to something. And this is one of those things that's really fucking difficult to do with a video game, you know, and impossible to do with any of the non-interactive mediums. But genuinely, like, throughout, every single time, I never looked at a dialogue option and thought, Lee would never say that. I was always thinking, is this what my Lee says, you know? And yeah, just really, really impressed by that. So the voice acting, I know I've said it before, and maybe I talk about it too much. Voice acting is one of those things. It is one of the most difficult ways to act. They don't. They're standing there in the booth. They don't. A lot of the time, don't know exactly what the character's face is going to look like. So they, you know, just have to follow the voice, you know, shit. What are they called again? Whatever. The director, let's go with that. Their lead, you know, trust them that they're not making them look like a complete asshole. And, you know, on occasion, they'll be lucky enough to have animators who are gonna, you know, work in what they do, you know. The Robin Williams, as it were. R.I.P. But the yeah, I am deeply in awe of voice actors in general, but yeah, here, like, holy shit, they do such amazing. Yeah, Clementine, the actress for her, like, it's I cared so much about this 8-year-old girl who, like, I can recognize doesn't exist in the real world. You know, I so badly wanted to protect her from the zombie apocalypse. Just, yeah. And yeah, everyone does a really solid job. Um, I There were some of them where, like, there were times where I worried that they were going to lean too heavily on a stereotypical trait. And ultimately, and, you know, feel free to disagree, I don't think any of them did. It's also, you know, it's possible they will in some of the other branching paths. I couldn't say. Now, right. So, basically, you know, on Steam, it's actually listed as point and click. And I think that does make a lot of sense. Basically, so when it's not dialogue, basically you can sometimes walk around, but the camera is, it's somewhat reminiscent of, like, Resident Evil 2. Can't speak to the rest of them. But this thing of, like, the camera will be in a specific spot and it might, like, turn or move a little to follow you. But it's not really an over-the-shoulder cam, at least not, like, consistently. And yeah, you are, like, you might be in this that's also something I think they did a good job of keeping varied. Sometimes you are in a small enclosed space. Sometimes you have a bit more freedom of movement. It's never like just ridiculous how much freedom of movement you have, and like there's a certain degree of linearity. But but yeah, basically you will be moving around and you can choose when to talk to who, and you can investigate the things that you see if there's and that's something I appreciate. Maybe I've been, I did play all of the Rusty Lake games, and I think I'm okay with it being a little while before. I think over the course of those games, the developers got better and better at making it like, okay, the player is definitely going to know what to do there, but none of them are bad, to be clear. I love almost all of them, but the yeah, in this one, basically, if you can do anything with a thing, there's going to be like a little indicator, and then you point the cursor to that indicator, and then you'll be told what you can do, and it might change over, like hypothetically, if you see that, if maybe at first you can just investigate a thing, and then, Lee will investigate and note, oh, hey, maybe I could open this thing, for example, and then, maybe an option will pop up to try with just your bare hands, or your wolf feet, and maybe you'll, have to find an item. But if you're using an item from your, I can never remember if it's inventory or inventory, but whatever. Now I've said both, at least one of them's wrong. So basically, yeah, if there's something in your inventory that you can use in a specific spot, you don't have to go into your inventory. You just point to where you are trying to use the thing, and then it'll either pop up or not. Which also, I would not have thought that would, I would have figured that I would get really annoyed with having that, but I don't know, it really worked. But yeah, I think that more or less, yeah, and occasionally the camera will be locked, and let's see, let's see, where was I going with that? Yeah, there are times where you will be attacking zombies, and sometimes it's with just stuff that can kill them silently. Sometimes you'll have a gun, but you're not like running around and you get to freely aim and shoot, at least not very much in this. And I forgot to talk about why this isn't survival horror, so I'll just briefly note, one of the main things is there's not really resource management in this. So basically, one of the things that it accomplishes multiple things. Among these things is that you as the player are not constantly like scanning areas to find stuff to pick up. Like you might be asked, hey, you should find this thing, and then you're focused purely on that thing. now, because you're not constantly trying to find, just resource, items. That's one of the things. Another is that it means that the game can, like, without taking resources that you've gathered, it can say, it can have a character say, we're running out of resources, because, like, that's another thing. It's not as bad as escort missions, but it's one of those things where we're like, oh, come on, why did you let me spend all that time and energy gathering all these resources if you're just going to take them all away from me? And I appreciate sometimes, it can be an effective element, but I think here it would have been more just like frustrating. And the yeah, right, I don't think I've really I think I keep dancing around, so I'll just come out and say it. I really appreciate the way that this forces you to focus on the character relationships rather than zombies, dead or not, dead or undead. Again, if you just want one where it's just about killing zombies, there's plenty of other games, and it would have really distracted here if there had been way more zombie killing. And to be clear, I'm also, like, I'm glad that, like, Left 4 Dead doesn't get bogged down with, like, there is some character stuff there, but you can ignore it. You can let it kind of just become white noise, which, like, if it became white noise in this game, that's it. Like, it's the game failed, and in my opinion, that never happened, which is very impressive considering, like, there's a lot of people arguing in this game. Now, I think that more or less covers, I guess. So I think I will talk about so I mentioned, point and click. So it is worth noting, I would not really call this a puzzle game. Like, there's not really puzzles, but there are tasks. I saw at least one review where someone said that this was the only game they'd never needed a walkthrough for. Noob. Just kidding. I really appreciate that. And, I think it's important that there are games for all kinds, like, honestly, like, if I could go back and have the first games I played be substantially less challenging, I think I probably would have been, that would have been more my kind of thing, but and it also does mean, like, genuinely, if you know how, like, if you've ever used a mouse and honestly, you don't even have to right away master WASD or Q and E. Q and E are for the QTEs, but yeah, that's it. And other than that, I think you can also use the mouse, but I personally preferred using 1, 2, and 3 keys for, say, like, think dialogue options. Yeah, that's it. Like, there's not any other so like, hypothetically, this could be the first game you play, and I want to underline that I'm not saying, if you're, like, a child and you're looking to get into games, under those circumstances, under no circumstances should you play this. But, like, hypothetically, let's say, I would probably say you should be at least 18. But if you're over 18, regardless of your age, if you have, like, the you need some like hand-to-eye coordination and reflexes, but it's also a game where like you're not constantly gonna be like, like hypothetically, if you don't already have those, definitely don't play a Left 4 Dead game because you're really gonna be frustrated. But in this, like, the like when you fail in this game, like you don't usually have to redo very much, and some of the parts where you need fast reflexes or the like are also short. So even if you like fail on several, like eventually you'll have it down, and it doesn't really have randomized elements. So if you have a good enough short-term memory, you can just keep going until you have it down like that. But yeah, because that again, I mentioned survival horror. A lot of those have puzzles, sometimes very taxing ones. And yeah, I think it works well in a lot of those. Occasionally they'll get kind of ridiculous with it, but I appreciate a game like this that is scary, but doesn't have puzzles. Because like for a while, that was pretty much like, if you were going to play a scary game, it would also have puzzles. Not always vice versa, but and yeah, like again, it frees up so that you are focused on like the yeah, managing relationships. Like there was a time where I was working my way through one of the tasks. Again, feels silly to call them puzzles. And instead of like being like, how am I gonna get past this part? I have no idea how to, like I was sitting there thinking, I better get this, I have to hurry because like people depend on me. I was in the game. I was not at all like, um, and that's rare for me. I struggle with focusing a lot of the time. So it's, yeah, like I was identifying entirely with Lee and the situation that was, yeah, just a video game. And yeah, um, I think that might just about cover. Yeah, I wouldn't rule out that it might be grindy if you try to go for multiple story paths. Um, it wasn't grindy to play through the entire thing just the one time. And I think that pretty much covers. I I don't really mind QuickTime events. I know other people do. I mean, it's difficult to say whether or not there are too many for like you individually, personally. I think, I mean, I have played games where I was like, okay, this is getting out of hand. But yeah, this never came close. I feel like I'm dating myself. Remember when the Wii was new and like the launch games would just constantly have silly little things where like, oh, now you should do now tilt the Wiimote, and now, swing the Wiimote. And it's like, okay, we get it. You're really proud of the technology. Like, please either stop pushing it so much or think of something really cool. And eventually they did. Like, I maintain Red Steel 2 makes really solid use of the Wiimote. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that you want to avoid, and this game never even came close. Yeah. But I also really appreciated the way that they they showed how much you can do with those as well. There's a couple of like obvious things, like maybe there's something heavy that you have to lift. Um, you know that sort of thing. But then there were also others where it was, yeah, very very different. And I was, yeah, like genuinely, because the thing is, so with QTEs, like a number of them, it's like they'll prompt you to use a specific key. The QTEs, so it could be a number of different keys, and then you have to very quickly hit that one before too much time passes. In this one, like basically the QTEs are you rapid firing Q, and then sometimes when it gets to the very end of that, you might also have to press E. But that's it. And yeah, I really would have thought that got, like, as soon as I realized that, I was like, this is gonna get really annoying. And like part of it is the fact that there's not as many as, like, I've played games with way way more than this. Now, I think that more or less. Let's see, what else is there? Right, I also appreciated that when you are killing walkers, like, yeah, sometimes you can move at least somewhat. Other times you are more or less standing still. And there was at least one spot where I was like, okay, this should probably end soon because this is starting to feel like a shooting gallery. But then it ended like within 2 seconds of that. So good job. And the fact that it did last, as long as it did, meant that it really, like, I felt the weight of it, and it's that thing of, like, as much as I love games where I am, engaging in physical, it doesn't have to be combat, but something, I used to play a lot of platformers, not as much as anymore. Yeah, I when you're constantly doing it, you can somewhat get used to it. And that's something, like, I felt the weight of every bullet I fired in this, which, again, if you play 10 minutes of, during a big attack, 10 minutes of either Left 4 Dead game, you'll have fired more bullets in that time than you do in the entirety of this. So I think I will just note, yeah, when you are, walking around to investigate things and such, a few, I would say, minor things, but I'll in the interest of being as thorough as possible, and some people have a stronger aversion to these than I do. I think I'll start with the one that I felt was the least important, just to get it out of the way. Sometimes the speech bubble thing will pop up, so you can try to have a conversation with this person, and it'll just be the character saying, I really don't want to talk right now. And then it goes back to giving you control back of Lee. And then, maybe you'll do a thing that makes you think, okay, now I talk to them, right? So you point towards them, you see the speech bubble, so you click it, and it's still just that character saying, I really don't want to talk right now. And that felt a little, there was one specific spot where I was like, okay, like, why did you let me talk to multiple people if they're all just going to say not right now. That felt, I don't know. I wonder if maybe the idea was that the player would be thinking, I kind of want to, I need to talk to this person right now, and for it to be something the game is taking away from you like that, but I don't know. I think it was maybe also, if I recall correctly, that happened very early on, and I was at the time still thinking like, well, I better be thorough. I should talk to everyone, and for that, it felt like, okay, then why did it pop up? And now I feel like Linku killing the shopkeeper. I think that does pretty well cover the uh let's see, there was at least one more thing. Right, yeah, so that was the least important. One that I appreciate some people really take issue with, and in other games it bothers me a lot. When you are walking around, there are some invisible borders. Yeah. And sometimes the controls can be a little awkward and finicky. Um, basically, like, you might be trying to walk. Let's say that there's a counter on your left, and essentially, like, in front of you, there is yeah, that would be next to the counter, and yeah, the you're trying to walk next to the counter, and maybe the game, if you just press the actual direction, it won't quite do it. And what you have to do is combine it with one of the other keys in a way that isn't completely what's the word? It's not something you would necessarily figure out, excuse me, if you didn't, yeah, it's not necessarily something you would figure out just like that. And this, ultimately, it didn't happen so often that it like really took me out of it, but it did happen on occasion. Yeah, not that often, but I get, if that's something that's going to bother you, then yeah. And so the enemy design, right? I guess okay. So just briefly, so the various human characters also, they tend to look very distinctly different. I think there's maybe one case where there were two that looked a tiny bit similar for my ability to tell them apart, but overall, yeah, a lot of they make good use of the yeah. So the enemy design, they do a good job of having multiple distinct walkers, and some of them are nice and gnarly. At least one is like missing their jaw, and they do a good job of making them look like they've been through hell. Ultimately, and this is where I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to like be overly harsh here. I get that this was, they were not huge um, when they made this. And yeah, so again, I say it in the interest of covering as much as I can in the review, and because I know to some people this is extremely important. I don't think it's a big deal, but ultimately there's not, there's not as big a level of variety to walkers here as in, a roughly equivalent, like hypothetically, if you sat down and you know, either played this game or watched the TV show, and no going back with either of them, just played all the way through this entire game once, or watched as much of the TV show as you could, and you spent the same number of hours on them, yeah, the TV show would deliver more in that regard. And that is, you know, there's a number of reasons for it. But yeah, like tech and budget and how much time they had to do this stuff and such. And I mean, part of it is also like at the end of the day, both of making the TV show and making the game, both very, very difficult. With the game, they have to make the walker, more or less from the ground up. Whereas with the show, like hypothetically, if they just need someone off in the background, they'll hire the performer, put them in costume, maybe put some makeup and blood and stuff like that on, and that's that. Where here it's a lot of work, so yeah. um that might more or less cover. I do think they did a good job on, like when it comes to zombies, you want the kind of stumbling walk, and yeah, I thought they did a good job. Also, part of like just having, so they're moving fairly slow, but they're still fucking dangerous. They'll rip your face off if you aren't careful. And this thing of the way that essentially with a zombie, once you're aware, okay, that's a zombie, if you're physically able to get away from them, maybe kill the zombie, something like that, at that point it's about, well, is there someone nearby you need to protect? Make sure you're not careless, and watch out if there's a lot of them, and yeah, they capture that quite well here. And certainly, even, when the times where it is like conversations and such, I never felt like that we were just pretending like there weren't zombies, it always felt like, well, the if we're not seeing or hearing them right now, well, they're not that far away, they're still dangerous. That's why we have all these conflicts, and I also, thought they did a good job with the element that the interpersonal conflicts. Part of what's going on is, of course, like even if multiple members of a survivors group during the zombie apocalypse are like, well, that guy's a complete asshole. Well, what are you gonna do? Like, you're gonna kick him out of, you know, the safety you have, or force them to not travel with the group, or something like that. That seems like, I mean, okay, you think they're an asshole, but you're gonna condemn them to death for being an asshole. That's so. And I guess, yeah, I'll briefly note, I thought they did a good job throughout this game of having the various things that one can imagine dealing with in a zombie apocalypse. Different things there come up in a way that I was really impressed with how fast it moves a lot of the time. Yeah. So I think that does. This is where I would normally get into AI, but it's not. There's not really. I guess I can't really say much about that for enemies, because again, like, you're not spending very much of this, like, in a situation where AI, where if we're talking about, like, well, can the enemy perceive you, and if so, what do they do? Like, there's not that much of that. It tends to be more like scripted, but the various the way that characters move, and sometimes, like, characters will have you know like, they'll move back and forth or something to yeah. And I also thought they did a good job with the inventory element of neither overusing nor just letting it be forgotten. And the so there are, I guess I'll say there is at least one fetch quest, and I'm not going to give away whether it's more than one. I'll just say I never felt like it got to be too much, and it's also one of those things where, considering that the game is primarily about these, like, interactions with other characters, and then some, like, investigating and using items that are in your inventory, stuff like that. Yeah, like, considering that, it's not really like a fetch quest is more like, well, if there is a core gameplay loop, like, I mentioned earlier, Just Cause 3, that has fetch quests, and it's essentially, well, we got to think of different shit for the player to do, and yeah, so I already mentioned that it is linear. You don't really have that much freedom overall, and I think it works well. I think it's maybe in part because, like, there are times where it almost feels like I kind of have some freedom of movement right now. Like, oh, I can go to several different little areas here. But it's this thing of, like, at the end of the day, it's not really about, like, okay, now the player can just do all of these things. No, like, the idea is, and again, I appreciate, part of it is also, limitations, the budget and time and tech, and but yeah, um, I felt like, well, I have to do this in order for us to survive in a way that, it can work well when a linear game can make you feel like that, because it is technically covering for the fact that it is linear. The atmosphere is quite strong, similar to the show. There's the small short bursts of graphic violence, but other than that, there's these scenes where it seems like, well, I don't know. I mean, are we more or less okay in this situation? There's creepiness. There are some very effective, ominous, like, yeah, little bits where I thought, oh, this is not going to go well. And yeah, I thought it worked really well that the cutscenes are all in engine. Never goes to pre-rendered or something stylized or something. The graphics. This is also an area where I'm going to be careful not to be like overly, harsh. I understand some people think that the graphics are not good. I don't really agree with a few exceptions that I'll go into. I think first off, I really want to note I love that the graphics really do use, like, there's this cell shaded style, and I haven't read the comics, but I have seen stills, panels and such from behind the scenes on the DVDs for the show. They like not all of the time, but when it's like, yeah, for some of the time, this has a style quite similar. It feels like they brought the comic to life. I thought that was the exact right choice. And again, I appreciate, if they tried to make it photorealistic, there's a couple of things there. Hypothetically, if they had, for one, it would have aged badly. For another, limitations on tech and such. And it is also, I mean, at the end of the day, like, if you want to see this with, if you want Walking Dead, like, there is a, the show is over now, but there was a live action show. We don't need everything in video games to be like photorealistic. I really admired how much emotion they got out of the faces, because again, that is the, like, the voice acting and the facial acting have to do a lot of heavy lifting. Ultimately, beyond that, like, a lot of like body language and such, they can only do so much. Like, most of the time, it doesn't look like bad as such, but it is, I mean, if in part it is also showing its age, I appreciate, but then, there were games from around this same time. I mean, so to be clear, the following is not me like ragging on an independent game for not being up to like AAA standards. I'm just saying, if we were just talking about the year, this came out the same year as let's see, Hitman 5. I used to know the title of that game. I don't remember it right now, but yeah. The one after Blood Money and before the 2016 one. And that one, yeah, looks better because they had much more, as far as resources go. But yeah, so the faces and the voice acting have to do a lot of heavy lifting. I've already talked in detail about the voice acting. So the faces, I will acknowledge there is an occasional hiccup where it is a tad Team America World Police. The the puppet movie. Does anybody still remember that movie? You know, Big Joel talked about it not that long ago, I guess. Anyway, um, yeah, you know, yeah, occasionally it will have that quality to the face acting, but a lot of the time, I would argue most of the time, it really does, like, they have so much articulation to lips and, like, you know, the various, yeah, the eyes, like, that's one area that I really think they did phenomenal at, because, like, the when a video game, when the characters in it have dead eyes, that can really just take so much out of it, you know. And in this, like, you know, it was only when looking at the eyes of the zombies that I felt anybody had dead eyes, and that's another area where it would have been a problem for this game, because holy shit, if you're, like, mistaking a, you know, living character for a walker because of the dead eyes, that's a problem. Let's see. I think that might more or less cover. The sound design is very nicely done. It's one of those things where it can be really difficult, you know, because sometimes you'll be in the same area, like, essentially the player, you know, where it's either going to take the player, you know, a few minutes to deduce and run around and do the things they need to do, or, you know, if the player's really struggling, maybe it'll take, you know, a bit longer. And ideally, you don't want the player to realize, oh, hey, the sound's kind of on repeat. You know, you'll want a more involved soundscape. And yeah, they did a really good job on that here. And nowhere either felt too noisy or just too overly quiet. And the music is very, yeah, I was, it's the so, you know, it has to get, it has to help with the general emotions of, just like, for example, if there's, you know, an argument or something, but it's not necessarily like life or death. It also, you know, another piece of music might have to communicate to the player, you know, this is really, you know, this is life or death, you know, you have to act now, supplies are limited. And yeah, they nail it every step of the way. And so I think I have probably already pretty well covered. Yeah, it's, the game is not particularly challenging. I was impressed by how much I still felt like I was, like, there are things in the game that still feel hard earned. And the let's see, I never felt like there wasn't anything that the game, yeah, I never felt like the game didn't really deliver something compelling, you know, even if it wasn't necessarily, as far as it, yeah, having challenge. But yeah, you know, I really got into the, yeah, caring about the characters. And yeah, that more or less covers the, yeah. So the game does have achievements on Steam. Uh, Most of them are just, you know, completing the game, the further you get, the more of them you'll just unlock, get whatever. I have seen at least one that let's see, is that a spoiler? I think I'll just leave it to, there's at least one that isn't just gotten by completing the game. And so I can't really speak too much about the replayability, but I did want to note something I thought was quite clever, and I have heard that this is something they put in some of the others as well. There are times where this will tell you the percentage of other players who made a specific choice in one of the times where you had to say or do something to help define how the what's the word, the story plays out after that part. I think that might just about cover. So I didn't run into any bugs. If I had, I would have offered a carrot. But as far as glitches go, it didn't happen very often, but there was this there was at least one part. It happened very, very little, but there was at least one part where the game had managed to get me sufficiently emotionally invested that I was really, really worried about what would happen to a specific character. Hampered just ever so slightly by that character turning invisible, which I don't think is supposed to be part of their power set. It hardly ever happened, but it did happen, and I've seen others report the same. Right. I also thought they did a really good job in this as far as like the settings, both in making all of them feel distinct, and they each have their own identity while still feeling like they belong in the same game and the places that you are, that this is set and such. And I really appreciated the way that some of them you'd spend more time than you might think at. Others you might not. Like there was at least one where I, as the player, didn't spend very much time there, but because there was like a time skip, technically the characters had spent some amount of time there. That was and they definitely did make sure that it's that thing about like when you're making a video game, you don't want to risk the player getting bored with the setting, and they did a really solid job on that. And the level design is good. I think, I don't really want to give examples. I'll just say that it strikes a good balance between making it clear to the player where we're supposed to be going, and also making it, you know, not feel like, crap, what was that? I think, was it maybe, I do not remember that YouTuber's name, but a YouTuber did a really excellent video talking about, I think it was called Yellow Paint, which is this thing of like, that's where you're supposed to go, player, and yeah, I never felt like there was just yellow paint in this. Like, there were times where I pretty much knew where it must be that I'm supposed to be going, but it's, for example, like, sometimes it's just like, well, it I'm not sure where else I could go. Sometimes it's because, maybe there's a conversation between characters and that like nudges us in that direction without literally having the yellow paint. And they do a really solid job on environmental storytelling, much like the TV show. Like you look at the different places and it's like, oh shit, this, yeah, they really they held out as long as they could, I guess, because like essentially, you know, on at least one occasion in this game, you will go to a place where it's like, well, clearly the people who were here before tried to hold out for as long as they could, I mean, essentially the fact that you're there's some chance that means that nobody else was there when you got there. Or maybe they joined your group. I'm not going to give away whether, which it is exactly, but yeah. And yeah, so once again, I can't really call them puzzles, but the tasks, I thought they did a good job of keeping them sufficiently varied. The yeah, the kinds of challenges you might face in the zombie apocalypse. Oh, I guess I haven't really talked about, so technically there are stealth segments, I guess it's fair to call them, in this. Like, it's not like a full-on stealth game, it's not Thief or something. At some point I cannot put into words. So there's gonna be a VR game. Maybe it's already out. I'm trying not to think too much about it, but there is or will be a Thief VR game. And if I had the VR headset, is that all you need? Whatever. I would be on that like flies on shit. I can't even put into words how much I fucking miss having new Thief to play. Like, how many times am I gonna play the first four? I've already played, let's see, I guess it's at least twice. Holy shit, is it 3 times for each of them? Jesus Christ. Keeping in mind, like, at least one of them is it can take like between 30 and 40 fucking hours per fucking game per playthrough. But anyway, rant over. It's not to that extent, but yeah, there is like, maybe you're sneaking, maybe you're on some kind of surface that you're worried is going to make noise if you move too fast over it. I literally just got done saying it's not like Thief. Whatever. Maybe there are walkers nearby that, you can't take on all of them all at once, so you have to figure out, what order to take them out in and what to use to take them out silently, stuff like that. I thought they that was a good way to, like, I mean, hypothetically, you could make an entire fucking game. Okay, please put in the comments if there is a zombie stealth game, because that's, I mean, preferably where I play as the survivor taking out zombies, but honestly, I could go for a one where I'm playing as a zombie and being stealthy. But moving on. Yeah, hypothetically, you could make an entire game out of just that. I don't think that would have worked all that well for this game. I really thought they did a fantastic balance between, I mean, I've already mentioned, there's an ever-present sense of danger. Like, throughout this entire game, you're like, I mean, if we step out of line, those fucking zombies are gonna make lunch out of us, That, then these, like, stealth segments, and the, occasional bit where you're, like, shooting them or that sort of thing, and ones where you're, rushing to accomplish something, maybe fighting one of them off with melee or that sort of thing. Maybe you drop the gun or something. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing, like, because a lot of, I guess I've pretty much already said, I've played a lot of the Left 4 Dead games. Yeah, like there are, like, things in there that but like a lot of the time in those, it's essentially like the yeah, the thing about tactics, and yeah, um I think that covers everything for this one. Yeah, so I rate this 9 tough, sometimes even heartbreaking decisions made for Lee to keep Clementine and the other survivors safe in a very dangerous world overrun by the walking, chomping dead out of 10.